Hello or namaste. Welcome to Atypical Dikkate, a conversation podcast. I'm your host Soumyaa, and in this podcast, I talk to fellow queer, neurodivergent, and disabled folks. This is a way of taking up space according to our own terms. Today, I have Mohammed with me. Mohammed is a molecular biologist by training and is currently working as an LBQ Plus project officer with YVC and is a vaccine research consultant with Sangat Bhopal under IHRI Vaccine Equity 2.0. They are the co-founder of IHRI, which stands for Intersex Human Rights India, a pan-Indian intersex space led by intersex people. They are a research fellow with Intersex Asia, a digital resident with Design Beku and Point of View. Their interests and research lie in bridging gaps between STEM and queer rights. Their intersections lie in understanding bodies, accessibility, social justice, and technology. Mohammed loves making adrak chai and is currently obsessed with fungus and ants carrying sugar in garden trails. That's such a lovely bio. Hello, Mohammed. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Hi Soumya, thank you so much for having me. And yes, I love making adrak chai and currently obsessed a lot with how, the beauty of fungus around the nature is. And yeah, ants carrying sugar trails is something I have been obsessed as a child, and it continues. And it shows my neurodivergence is still there. Such a neurodivergent thing to do. I have been doing okay. I feel like when people ask me this question, how I've been doing, I take a breather check, and I believe that it's gonna get better one day at a time. So things have been looking okay, I believe. So how have you been?
I'm okay. And I love how fresh this is, as in, I can sense the vulnerability and honesty because usually when people ask, how are you? And people are like, I'm okay, I'm fine. But I'm like, that's not exactly how I'm feeling? And it's very difficult for me to just say I'm fine and I'm okay and then move on, right? So thank you for that very refreshing answer. Given your background in science, I'll quickly jump into the conversation and would like to hear your experiences, your insights, especially like what specific barriers do marginalized communities face when trying to access healthcare, and how can hospitals work to eliminate these barriers? How can healthcare systems better address the issue of chronic health erasure and improve access for individuals with less visible or misunderstood conditions?
I think first of all, to kickstart this conversation, is to believe that the barrier is created because people think that we are not well aware enough of what we are going through. Our like suffering and our pain, etc., is not like understood widely enough. That is why these sometimes these barriers exist. In my very specific experience of accessing healthcare, I've always seen that even the way you handle yourself, or the way you speak, or the way you put out language or knowledge out there sometimes falls short, especially because you do not belong to the medical field. uh, I come from a molecular biology background. I do know a lot of things about genetics and how biology works. But when I go to a specific healthcare specialist and I tell them that my pain is real, or this is what I'm going through is painful, they tell me that but this is bearable. You know, on a point of scale of whatever pain exists, for someone who passes as assigned male at birth, this is bearable pain. And this annoys me a lot because this is really dismissal of how I experience pain and suffering. Instead of saying that we understand your pain and suffering and trying to navigate around that, I constantly get to hear things like, oh, but this happens, but you have to be more thoughtful of other people going through more pain. So the answer usually is never, it's never in a binary sentence. It is so how do I say, it's so complicated and mixed up for people who have multiple marginalizations. And sometimes now I'm very much convinced that it has to do a lot with name also, like not wanting to delve into the conspiracy part of it. But I do feel sometimes that it is made difficult to you when you have a certain surname, when you have a certain educational background. Even if you're very educated and you have like money to access these services, there are still these barriers put into place just because of your name. And I've faced these barriers multiple times while accessing healthcare services at very reputed hospitals in India. And what stands out as an important factor there, I have seen as a big barrier, is that they look at me, they look at an able bodied person, but some of the disabilities that we have are not physical and not visible onto an eye for a person to say that, oh, you have a disability. So if I say things like, I cannot stand too long in a queue, they'll be like, but you look strong, you look healthy, why can't you stand? Why do you need special treatment? So I'm tired of hearing such things, because all of this leading to chronic health erasure is so very real. And when we have these conversations with healthcare specialists, with doctors, I have been repeatedly hearing this one answer, and that answer is like, but we don't have enough time in our careers, in our hospitals or cubicles to be humane about it. We have other patients to look after. So, while I really understand that point of view, because I too come from a medical family, and I've seen how my siblings and parents have suffered under the pressures of management and this thing. But it is for them. It is you either have to get sorted with your one patient. You actually don't have time to be respectful and humane with that person. You are not you cannot have that personalized understanding of their pain and suffering, because, well, there is no replacement for that. So I feel like when conversations are being built around this, most of the time they erase these conversations, saying that we don't have time, or they say that you go ahead and ask the management to make things ready for you. And just with that, there is a dilution in the conversation. It just gets away under the carpet, pushed away, and then there is no further conversation to this. And which kind of stills the conversation around how do we improve access for individuals. And then the understanding of chronic or any healthcare issue, which sometimes maybe mimics or is similar to other healthcare issues out there. It is even worse for such individuals. I've been misdiagnosed and mistreated for a autoimmune health condition. And when asked that doctor why couldn't she do her proper research, she said, I don't have that many resources at hand, so we will give whatever we think is right, at the cost of the suffering of the person itself. Because they are like, it's okay, pain is tolerable. And because pain is so gendered in our society, pain and associations of pain itself, so it is expected out of you to tolerate it into some extent. Just because you appear in a certain gender or identity, it is expected of you, no matter how terrible the pain is, that is expected, you have to show some degree of cooperation from your end, because we cannot do with the whatever resources that we have been provided. We have tried enough. Now it is the onus is on you, really. So I think when we think about what hospitals can really work to eliminate these barriers, is that uh, elimination is a very far-fetched dream that every person accessing, I could say every new, disabled queer person trying to access healthcare can really think of. But what they can really start is trying to install more humane or humanity form of ideas within their trainings, to be it the pharmacist, be it the nurse, be it even the security guard. All of these things matter, and all of these things are important for us to access spaces. Sometimes certain queer, trans, non-binary people are just rejected from hospitals because of the way they express themselves. The person there feels very powerful enough that they can reject this person because they maybe have dressed up in a certain way or have a certain color to their hair, and they associate I mean, it's even funny to even think about that they associate different hair colors to queerness. Like I've heard of someone who had blue hair and is not a queer person, was rejected entry at a very reputed hospital because their hair was blue. And so and so forth, where conversations around trust and the trust around the medical ecosystem also, like we have heard within working in the community, within the queer community in Bangalore, is that if you're a queer doctor with colored hair, patients might not trust you. So it's like all these forms of expressions really become a bias in the end of how we look at the person and how we want how it's trust built around this system. Yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
It's terrible, and it's really distressing, like the distress that we experience in this, which is systemic, right? And it becomes your responsibility. It's individualized, it's pathologized, and people have this certain idea of disability. When you mentioned about cues,
Hmm.
and it was so relatable. Before I knew that I was autistic, I would push myself, and I would know that I'm uncomfortable, it's too much, I'm being overloaded, sensory wise, but I would still push through, and I would feel completely drained. There's this misconception that you are lazy, and
Mm.
I pushed myself so hard, um, to try to do better, but my body was like, you need rest.
Hmm.
So I like went too far in, and then I drained myself out, I would burn myself out. But now when I'm like starting to embrace and actualize my autistic self,
Hmm.
understand my body, understand its needs, then I'm able to take a step back and process the surrounding, because ultimately, um, we are navigating a world which is not accessible to us, which it's not inclusive for us. So it takes extra energy, extra spoons to just navigate everyday life, and it's not easy when you're diagnosed later, right? You have to process everything, and that's a lot of emotional work on top of like adulting. So it's not easy, but coming back to what you shared about being queer and disabled. Moving away from healthcare, uh, in society in general, what initiatives can be implemented to improve the accessibility of queer spaces for people with disabilities, ensuring that they are inclusive to all? How can society work towards making queer spaces more welcoming and inclusive for transgender, intersex, and non binary individuals? And this is something which I have seen, like there's this binary, like in disability spaces you can't always talk about queer issues, in queer spaces you can't always talk about disability issues.
Yes.
So there is this differentiation, but collective liberation won't happen if we don't build solidarity, right? And that's an important work. So I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
I think as of 2023 right now and proceeding into the future years to come, it's an important reminder to ourselves, to the youth, and to people who will come after us, is that if our movements are not intersectional now, then there is no liberation for us. Even if one alphabet of the acronym LGBTQIA plus is not liberated, there is no liberation of any of you. Unfortunately, this thought and idea persists only in few individuals and movements that understand the importance of liberation for all. Now, for your specific, the question that you just asked, I can begin with saying that we need to encourage and emphasize the importance of using you know language that is not ableist, and like promoting practices in queer spaces that do not enable ableist or anything that is ableism to begin with. uh, a good example for this is there some diversity fairs conducted. I don't want to name who these people are, but I was once out with a friend, and he wanted to attend this mela in Bangalore that was hosted by a very specific queer organization. And he wanted a ramp to access the space, and he was very hesitant to call and ask that question, whether or not the space was accessible by a wheelchair or not. So I did the calling for him. I called up the space, and we asked, hello, do you have like a wheelchair accessible ramp? Do you have like a washroom that is gender neutral, or do you have sensory friendly lighting in the space or anything as such? And the person on the receiving end is like, please let me confirm with my manager. And what this person actually forgot while he said this is that we could still hear him when he asked this question back to the manager. And he very casually in Hindi he asks the following. He says, uh, uh, सर यहाँ disabled लोग भी आ सकते हैं क्या? uh, Meaning like, sir, can even can disabled people also come here? This the way he asked felt so terrible. It was so horrific. I cannot imagine how my friend must have felt in that moment, because I felt very angry, and I was like, what do you mean by like, you know can disabled people even come here? Does the space not belong to them as well? And he was like, I'm sorry, we don't have a wheelchair accessible ramp. Maybe your friend can attend online. So I was like, yeah, but your event is not online. Trying to make them understand the fact that virtual safe spaces for disabled folks and queer disabled folks exist, but they also come with their own terms and conditions. Some of these spaces gatekeep by asking a diagnosis. Diagnosis in the idea of keeping this space safe, and like saying that you cannot claim a disability and hijack the space, etc. So I think one thing is that we have to work collectively is that we have to use inclusive language that is respectful, that is affirming of the diverse identities and experiences that people have, and to acknowledge that these experiences exist, and experiences are always diverse. They are never a binary. So what you experience as a queer disabled person, it will be very different to what I will experience as a queer disabled person. And another thing is that I feel that we kind of don't talk much is that how are we making these spaces safe for people who may physically not feel safe to be in that space. So we say that we are now moving from the post pandemic era to a space where we are creating queer safe spaces that are holding what do you say meetups in person. But how many of these spaces are really promoting the safe idea of it? So like, I remember talking to someone who told me that just because the world has now moved offline does not mean that we stop creating virtual queer spaces for people that are safe, accessible, and welcoming in all sorts. So like, uh, it could be virtual meetups, it could be online forums, game nights, social media groups that are welcoming people of them and their identities. And like, also another thing that I feel people a lot of able bodied people take for granted is the use of technology that they can provide us for communication, for like resources and the tools that they can give us. For example, when I say that, just having a text, how do you say that, alternative texting on Instagram or on other social media websites, or or to use ASL interpreters when they are having workshops and webinars, to to make it more inclusive for people to access just spaces in general. Now I mean, when people would have heard my opening my introduction, they must have heard that I'm working as a vaccine research consultant, and this is something very important to my work because I work with the trans, intersex, and people with disabilities communities in India accessing vaccine. And in my research, I've come across that different marginalized groups were not able to trust vaccines because there was no availability of that information anywhere, and it was not provided to them. It was said to them that you take this or you don't. It's really now up to you making these decisions for yourself. Another thing that I really feel that we can like try doing is a, to provide some sort of financial or logistical support to these queer spaces. I mean, there are a lot of fundraisers that we can try, but sometimes doing that requires a lot of mental labor, but there is alternative ways to go around it. Maybe we can go ahead and do something like a diversity inclusion art music festival or some sort of creative expression forum where we just collect some money that goes to a collective mental health or a mental health fund that helps people out. I mean, there are ideas that exist, but there are very limited individuals that we know who are very willing to leave behind their ableist ideas and practices and really enforce this. So there are barriers, but there are like people willing to do, but these sometimes these barriers really overtake these people. And something that we also don't talk about in creating in or in spaces is the burnout that a lot of us face at the end of it. And with activism, with like social media awareness, like with advocacy or anything that requires us to put ourselves on ground, not only are we risking ourselves, our visibility, and I always say this, that visibility comes with a cost. And if you don't have safe support structures to sort of fall back and depend into, it really endangers your life. So one is that, and the other is obviously the burnout. Really is a very terrible feeling to go through, and what that does is really, it's a conversation that nobody wants to really have, even within mental health spaces. Burnout is something that people see as, oh, you will bounce back very quickly, don't worry, do yoga or do breathing exercises. And I've heard a lot of that, and I don't think that while that might at some extent might take your focus away from the burnout, but it might not really cure the burnout away, or or make you feel any better about the burnout. Yeah, some conversations that we should be really having in spaces while we take initiatives as well. Yes,
It takes years to recover from a burnout.
absolutely. Oh my god,
It's
yes.
not like days or not even a week, not even a month. It takes so much labor to come out of a burnout. You lose skills sometimes. The things that would like easily come to you, you lose skills. It's not easy, to navigate this, and that also affects the opportunities that you can access, you can't access, because when you burn out, you are not able to mask, and many of us marginalized folks have to mask in order to access spaces and opportunities. So it's not easy at all. And I know people say about yoga and meditation, and for some it might work. For someone like me, it doesn't. I close my eyes and I'll start having intrusive thoughts. It doesn't
Mhm.
work like that. So there are a lot of complexities come into space when you are neurodivergent, and a lot of is these advice, it's
Mhm.
around able-bodied people, right? So we definitely need to have more conversations around it and normalize talking about it, because otherwise again we live with shame, right?
Mhm.
We end up feeling like there's something inadequate in us. And we definitely need safe spaces to talk about these things. And it's so terrible that you have to disclose your diagnosis or disclose
Mhm.
your condition in order to access resources or spaces. It shouldn't be the case. it should be equitable, it should be like universally, available. So whoever wants to avail a certain thing and accommodation, they can easily do it, and they don't have to be put on a spot to disclose, because it puts a lot of pressure, it puts the onus on the person, and again it also opens up avenues for discrimination as well. So that pressure, I wish like more people understood that. And coming back to that, the pressure, what according to you, how can we help young LGBTQIA plus individuals resist peer pressure and maintain their identity and safety within queer friendly spaces? What strategies can be employed to foster a sense of community and support within queer safe spaces, so individuals feel less vulnerable to external pressure?
So there are some ideas that I've thought about this, and our and foremost, strategy should be creating a supportive and an inclusive environment where individuals may not be politically correct as well, and they're allowed to share what they feel about it, because learning and unlearning is a process. It's a lifetime process. It's gonna happen now. It's happening now as we speak. It might happen tomorrow. It might happen as we move along in life. But when I was accessing spaces, and this was a couple of years back, what I've noticed was that there was a lot of aggression coming from people whenever I made something that was not a politically correct statement. And that aggression did not come from a space where it was like, oh, I've repeatedly advocated for this, and that's why I'm now frustrated. That aggression came from the fact that, how are you not aware of this? Are you living under a rock? Kind of aggression, and this further kind of goes ahead and perpetuates through the media that people consume. Some of us, we did not grow up in environments where we had access to a lot of movies, TV shows, or proper internet connection to know what kind of media was trending back in the day, or what shows we should be watching, or understanding references. An example for this was, I was never inclined toward watching RuPaul's Drag Race, and I would attend these spaces where all they would talk is about RuPaul Drag Race, and I would feel so left out in these conversations, because I'm like, I don't get the hype. And as somebody who has ADHD and autism, I don't get the hype of certain things. Like, some people are like, oh, Gossip Girl is an amazing show. I'm like, yeah, maybe it is for you, but for me, I don't get the hype. And they get so offended about it. They're like, oh, how do you feel like, if we make mockery of your show or something like that? I'm like, you're most welcome to go ahead and shit about show that I like, because I am not so attached about it, or so critical about a show, because in the end it might have given me satisfaction of of consuming that media at one point of time. But I'm not so, like, attached to it to be really emotionally sad about it if someone says that they don't like it. And I've seen that uh, when you're kind of not in the realm of understanding references or pop culture references, you are excluded from spaces. And which is why here is what is an important conversation that we should be having, is that we should be encouraging an open communication in a very judgment free atmosphere. If someone says that they do not watch RuPaul's Drag Race, I think that that opinion should be respected and should not be questioned further, and said, yes, okay, very good, can we move on to the next question? And I think there is this diversity that we can celebrate, that there are a couple of people who do not like to watch this particular show, and this really will enhance and encourage the person to be true to themselves. They don't have to now mirror act as somebody else, or pretend to know that they know references, and put in extra labor and effort trying to understand what the hype about the show is, or what is it all about. It just makes them it just can just promote things like, you be you, you do you, type of thing. With specific respect to queer safe spaces and young individuals, I think there should be a mechanism where we can provide some sort of mentorship opportunity for younger members, in a way that is not grooming also, because a lot of spaces meant for younger folks are actually occupied by older queers, and they end up grooming people. And this is something that we really want to avoid. Now, an example for this I can give you personally is what is a space that I host here in Bangalore called Queer Campus Bangalore. Now, Queer Campus was founded in 2011 by two lovely individuals who were accessing college at that time. Over the years, the idea of queer campus has drastically changed. We no longer just serve to just queer and school and college going individuals. We also cater a safe space for young working professionals as well. And what that has helped us create is that it has helped us give individuals a sense of belonging, because now they don't have to pretend to fit in older spaces, and they don't feel comfortable fitting in older spaces. Like, there is a difference between a 22-year-old person attending a youth led space versus attending an older community space where all they talk about is how diversity, inclusion, equity, all the three major favorite corporate words are making a difference in their life. Maybe this young individual is not able to relate to that, because their company does not have that. So I feel like we have to understand that creating uh, youth led specific spaces are very important for us. And by creating spaces, or the fact that to think that there are too many spaces is very rudimentary. I think we should let go of the thought that there are too many spaces, and and spaces are not meant to remain same. They are going to constantly evolve. Some may get discontinued, some may continue for for a while. Another thing that I feel like is that we can offer resources for education and awareness on what the queer community faces. Now, why I say this is very important is we look at how the algorithm in Google and other social media has been acting around with, like, you Google something about an identity, and there's a lot of misinformation also that pops in. For example, I was giving a webinar recently, and I wanted to look up about something called as, hey, something titled as "What's the fuss about pronouns?" And all I got were answers that were anti-pronouns. So when we say things like, "Hey, you can Google this," it actually might not serve into our interests, because Google now, by definition, we know the algorithm is defined or will not give accurate or proper answers. It will actually give misinformation. So to navigate that is also a very tricky situation, because do you really go out of your way and you educate, or do you, like, you provide resources when you can, or you just say Google, and then Google or any other search engine ends up creating more misinformation. Then I think something that we can look at is uh, to enforce an accountability factor in spaces. A lot of time I feel like queer people get away with accountability because they know that when they're held accountable, they can use queer as a identity, how do I say this, something that prevents them from being held accountable. Some sort of some sort of card, I could really say, is that which prevents them. And we have seen here in our city that a lot of queer activists have abused a lot of people, and gotten away because they were queer, because they were a marginalized identity, and people did not want to report them because of them being queer. But because of we don't have these proper access to spaces that can really help us out, this will keep propagating and keep happening. So it is important that we work on establishing clear boundaries with the spaces that we engage with, and what are the expectations that we have within these spaces as well. I think that is an important conversation that we should be having with creating spaces, because it might help us mitigate the harmful and abusive or risky behavior that people might contribute to the space. Sometimes accountability is equated to cancel culture, and what happens is that that is used, and people start calling each other on social media, and that it perpetuates a harmful behavior within people, and it also lets loose of the facilitators or anyone who's involved with these creation of these safe spaces to just quit the group and not face any consequences later on. So I feel like there has to be some mechanism that will work out, or some establishment of some mechanism that can enforce consequences, or at least have consequences when someone perpetuates or someone does any harmful behavior. Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. Toxicity is a human trait, right? Like you can be a marginalized person, but if you're human, all of us have the tendency we can be toxic at any point in life, and it's important to be accountable, to have that self awareness, because safety is such a subjective thing. What might trigger me might not trigger someone else, and vice versa, right? And what you shared about safe spaces are co-created. It
Yes.
ideally it shouldn't be the responsibility of just one person or a couple of people. A safe space is co-created. How can we hold each other accountable while also humanizing the other person? But it has to be, both ways. It's not like one person ends up humanizing while the other person dehumanizes you, right? So a lot of care goes into it, a lot of emotional labor goes into co-creating a safe space, and everybody ought to be mindful about it when it's a community space. So I completely agree with you on that. But like speaking about, like, society and marginalization, in what ways does mainstream society often overlook or marginalize individuals with neurodivergent identities? And how can we combat this erasure? How do media and entertainment industries contribute to the erasure of neuroqueer individuals? And what measures do you think can be taken to rectify this?
Absolutely. So I think one to begin with this conversation is to look at how they portray neurodivergent people or individuals in a very stereotypical or harmful way in the media and entertainment. And having neurotypical people play neurodivergent roles also, and to play out certain traits, autistic traits or ADHD traits in such a manner that the person has to almost mimic those traits to make them work. So I think that is pretty harmful, because then that kind of makes a really mockery out of the way we express our individuality and ourselves. Another way is that when educational professional settings, they fail to provide us with adequate resources and support, mandated breaks, or just the idea that you can take a health checker or a hydration point check, or any thought that we all have 24 hours in a day, sort of a talk which people tell, all we all have the same time. It's just how we want to utilize it, and things about it, and the idea of how laziness works, etc. All of these mixed together. So that further leads to there is an that further leads to a lot of neglecting to even consider accessibility needs in public spaces and events. As I was telling you some time back, is that my friend was asking, are you even allowed to attend this event for being disabled? So this is another factor. And then there are these harmful myths and assumptions that they perpetuate about neurodivergent individuals, like for example, neurodivergent people are very less intelligent, or they have traits that are limited only to children, or it's a childhood thing, it should not happen in adults. And they are incapable of functioning independently, they have too much dependency, etc. Now, the ways that I can kind of look at to combat this erasure, first is to advocate for better accessibility, in public spaces and events, and we should use as much as of our social media and presence that we have online. And we also need to amplify neurodivergent voices and perspectives in media and entertainment. Is that if you're seeing a favorite show and we see that our writer or our favorite actor is not amplifying neurodivergent voices, I think we should reach out to them or write to them. Even if it is not read by them, it is okay. We did our attempt of it. Then I think ensuring that our educational and professional settings to be accessible and inclusive, at least as much as we can try, at least having something like a sunflower representative identity card, or anything that symbolizes neurodivergence. And how further do people know that this represents neurodivergence is that we educate others on the realities and lived experiences of neurodivergence people, hoping that this promotes some empathy and acceptance. Now, when we hope for this empathy and acceptance, we also have to look at promoting our own self advocacy, and empowering ourselves and other neurodivergent folks to speak about their experiences and the needs that they require. And while we do this, there is a need of, and there is this requirement of having intersectionality within the neurodiverse movement, and that there are, to recognize that there are other overlapping identities. I have, in my experience, I've seen neuroqueer people accept being autistic, but cannot accept being or having traits of being ADHD. And for them that becomes like too much. They say that is limited to kids only. So to recognize that there are other overlapping identities and experiences that people can have, and uh, and that there are other individuals with different neurotypes, and there are other marginalized identities that might not be known to us, that might exist as well. So it's important for us to recognize, accept, and just go along with it. Another thing is that we can look at fostering a lot of neurodiverse communities and support networks. If we don't feel like we don't have one, then we, as you said, we look at co-creating one. And then we advocate for better funding opportunities and resources within our research on neurodiversity that is out there. Then we encourage hospitals and other settings to look at neurodiverse people as people, and not as some sort of pathologizing condition that they have to find a treatment to. Then this can actually what just lead to the addressal of the stigma that is associated with neurodivergence, and it can help promote a positive representation of neurodivergent people in media and popular culture. All of this, hoping that it does. Yeah.
No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, and a lot of work needs to be done to sensitize people and also spread awareness. And like you said, a lot of resources there, but I think a lot more advocacy also needs to be done so people can find the the right resources. Not just people outside the community, but even people within the community, because it's not accessible, right? The information is not accessible. So a lot of advocacy has to go around that, because personally, it was a very long journey to understand and accept that I'm autistic, and I didn't have resources or help to, or someone who would dig with me, and help me understand what is it that I'm experiencing.
Absolutely.
So absolutely, a lot of advocacy has to go around that. And you briefly mentioned about, we have to make the spaces more accessible. So coming back to, workplaces and educational institutions, how can these better accommodate and support neuroqueer individuals to ensure their full inclusion? What steps can be taken to increase awareness and understanding of neurodiversity in the general population and in mainstream spaces? This is very important, because otherwise, when we grow up with that kind of otherization and exclusion, it leads to a lot of trauma as an
Absolutely.
adult. And then you have to, work around it and heal and do adulting. So what can we do right from the beginning to, better accommodate and support neuroqueer individuals?
I think some potential strategies that we can sort of look at, or start begin at considering, is that to try to implement flexible work or learning arrangements. And what I mean by that is, look at remote work opportunities with flexible hours and alternative assessment methods that do not cause a lot of panic and fear in the person undergoing these assessments, because at a lot of times we just fear for the dread, and we know that we are capable, we know that we just lack the confidence of it, and these assessments can sometimes can really break us down. I think we can look at asking, and also if we have our own spaces, offering specialized accommodations or any services or support services, really, like sensory friendly environments with like calmer music, or friendly lights, or give trigger warnings before anything flashy, or to and something that has to do with assistive technology, or really go ahead and push ourselves or push the community that we are working with individualized learning plans, then further that what can this is, it's all like a ripple effect. It can lead further as a strategies to provide diversity and inclusion training for the staff, the students who are involved in the areas of neurodiversity and are working on that, because I feel like learning is a continuous process, and language is the language of the learning is constantly evolving, and I think it's important that we know that this is important for us to learn and unlearn. uh, f- Further looking at is that we increase the representation. I know that representation sometimes cannot save us, but there are people who will look up to this representation and feel inspired by it. So we increase representation of neurodivergent folks, and but in leadership, most importantly, we involve them in decision making roles. A lot of time that neurotypical people do not want neurodivergent people in decision making roles. They just want to limit them there. They think that we cannot function or take these answers together or by ourselves. And then we promote awareness and understanding of neurodiversity through public campaigns, through social media, through educational materials that we know that will support us. We try to work with developing partnerships with organizations that have been working with neurodivergence or neurodiversity, and we work along with experts to help us provide resources to then let us go back to institutions and workplaces. We celebrate ourselves as neurodiverse people as a culture. We celebrate the art we create, the literature that we make, and the music that we create and listen. And this will really help us showcase the unique experiences and perspectives that neurodivergent people have. I think that something of celebrating ourselves is rarely done within our spaces, and then looking at, as I think I already mentioned about the self advocacy part. So self advocacy and self determination of how we want to promote our agency and autonomy, it's also very important to look at that. We try to look at how we can integrate neurodiversity or neurodiverse curricula, and how do we look at normalizing to celebrate the neurodiversity that we have now. The word normalize also can be pathologizing, but we take the power from the word really sometimes, and we make it less pathologizing for ourselves. To give a closure to some things that I've also thought about is to uh, develop some inclusive hiring practices or workplace cultures that embrace the value of a person and embrace the neurodiversity that they have, apart from just looking at the merits and how much experience that they might accumulated over their lives. We look at creating peer support groups and community events for neurodivergent folks to help them connect and build other diverse networks and solidarities. We look at implementing neurodiversity friendly policies in our work and educational institute, and procedures like mental health benefits in insurances and flexible leave policies. Also very important conversation that we kind of miss out from our wider understanding of how all of this impact us. We also look at to give a closure, we have to look at encouraging the development of assistive technology. I've already mentioned this, but emphasizing the fact that we have very less tools to support neurodivergent people in their everyday personal and professional lives. And there isn't enough that is being done to support individuals with this. So I think, this is some of the potential strategies that we can really look at.
This is very comprehensive and helpful, Mohammed. But something I've also seen in this spaces, I work in the social impact space, and I know you do as well. So one of the things that I often hear is like, organizations don't have resources,
Hmm.
right? So these are things that we want to do, and individually you can't pull them off. You need resources, you need support in order to do these things, right? So what are your thoughts on that? How do we create these community spaces, help marginalized people, help queer and neurodivergent people, disabled people to feel a sense of belongingness, to feel a sense of community? How do we push for this in the mainstream society, in the world, even in like educational institutions and workplaces?
Okay, so with lack of resources, I think one one idea is to really question, is there a fear within people that if they give us rights, then change is going to happen. A lot of time corporates know that changes require money, and which is why they don't want to commit to it. And I think there is when we have to use social media to really and our other online platforms to reach out to organizations and advocates for the movement to build that support and collaboration. And when they are able to provide that support and collaboration, then it kind of prompts businesses to share their resources and expertise, because it gives them also a lot of visibility to work along such a movement. And we know how corporates don't shy away from opportunities that give them any sort of visibility. In specific to universities, I believe that I think research institutions or any university in general should you know be able to hire or look at developing comprehensive departments that understand neurodiversity as diversity, and not as a not as something that is a disease or a disorder. Because a lot of times psychology or psychiatry institutions in India, they consider this as a disease, and they're like, okay, we need to treat this. So I think to like sort of go from the idea that from treating to really accommodating is the way that institutions should be looking at. And even if then they are not able to sort of say that we don't have time for this, etc., then I think the idea of tempting corporates with the fact that or telling any spaces that if you do this, funding will come. And sometimes that is much more enough for spaces to really start working, because funding means a lot to a lot of spaces, right? So I think we look at alternative ways as long as we of or whatever we can think of. Yeah.
And you briefly mentioned about using technology, right?
Yes.
To build safe spaces. So what are your ideas, like what are the specific interventions that we can bring about to create virtual queer spaces that are accessible and safe for a diverse range of individuals?
I think trying to look at safe spaces that are not just limited to one social media platform. Like I know that requires a lot of work, and I definitely do understand the nuances of that as well. But to have a widespread social media outreach, like have some support system on WhatsApp, something on Signal, something on Telegram. I mean, Telegram offers a lot of other better options than WhatsApp does, and it is a lot better than WhatsApp as well, in terms of just doing things and accessing the space as well.
A lot of like disability activism also started in online spaces, because again the world is not accessible, right? So a lot of people started building communities there, pushing for advocacy. And that is one of the reasons when, even if I know that X formerly Twitter. It has like worsened in the last couple of months because the autistic community is there, because the disability community is there, because the chronic illness community is there. It's very difficult to let go of it,
Mhm.
because I found a lot of resource. I learned about myself. I found a sense of belongingness there. So what else can we do with respect to social media? How do we leverage that to build these spaces?
I think another thing that comes to my mind is using hashtags. Sometimes to raise awareness really works, and making your own hashtags if they don't exist. Like within the intersex movement, we use a hashtag called No Pride Without I. So like and when you search this hashtag, it's not very widely used, but it exists. And so when you use it, it kind of creates this ripple, that people know that this hashtag exists and this is something that we can use to advocate for change. Sometimes I think it is okay to use social media influencers in a space where they can really be the correct allies that we need them to be, but most often what happens is they also overtake and hijack the space that we are trying to create, and take over our narrative. But we have to encourage them to share and be the ally that they always wanted to, and share and like retweet about neurodivergent content and about different perspectives to sort of raise awareness and understanding. And to like go ahead, like how do we like ensure this is gonna work, is that we also advocate for the use of inclusive language here as well, and the images that we use in social media to promote neurodiversity acceptance. We use social media to educate about the benefits of neurodiversity in space. We use research papers to sometimes prove this point, because well, corporates and academic spaces love papers that can show us the same thing, is that if you have neurodiversity friendly policies or acceptable policies, you will have people who will display problem solving skills or innovation that will really help your organization.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, clearly a lot of work has to go into, creating these spaces, making them safe and accessible. And that is why it's also important to build the next line of leaders or advocates, right? And this is where I think the youth spaces also come into place. So another, like, very because it's a long fight basically, and given that the exclusion that we face is systemic, given the burnout that we experience, so all this community spaces become even more important, given that other sorts of support are limited to us. So thank you for sharing everything today, Mohammed. This was very insightful. But before we close, any parting thoughts that you would like to share with us?
I think my only parting thought of that I can think is that we have existed before as queer, disabled, neuro folks. We will exist today, we'll exist tomorrow, and we will exist after, you know, after we have gone, others will exist after us as well. So we are not going anywhere, even if the world tries to erase us. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. We will be there. It was a lovely conversation and very insightful. Lot of food for thought for me to also reflect. And I think people who will listen to this, there are very practical strategies
Hmm.
that people can implement, so as to make queer and disabled people feel more included in our circles. So again, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining me today, Mohammed.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you're hearing this message, you have listened to the entire episode. So thanks for sticking around. You can listen to Atypical Dikkate on Spotify. And if you want to reach out to me, your host Soumya, check out the Linktree link in the description. See ya.